There was some knockdown dragouts that I've had with a few people. Some of it dealing with the early drafts of the script. Some of it dealing with eliminating different mechanics from the game. Some of it really dealing with, you're changing too much of this, right? You're going through and you're changing all of it. This isn't God of War anymore. And that argument persisted all the way, I think, throughout the development process. It was doubt and fear, man. Those things were our constant companions throughout the entirety of the beginning of this game.
It was only recently that Cory Barlog became a celebrity in the world of video games. He's been traveling frequently in the weeks since God of War's release, conducting interviews from Sydney to Madrid, basking in the game's overwhelming critical praise. But his relationship with God of War and its protagonist Kratos dates much farther back, to when he served as lead animator on the first God of War 13 years ago. Sony Santa Monica then made him director for both the second and third entries in the franchise. 8 months into God of War 3's development, however, he left the team for Crystal Dynamics, where he spent 3 years reimagining the iconic Tomb Raider games. And in 2013, Santa Monica's prodigal son returned, with a difficult task ahead of him, to not just create a new God of War, but to reinvent the very identity of the franchise itself.
We had just gone through a pretty difficult time, Ascension did not get reviewed well. A lot of people were pretty frustrated with that. They put a lot of time in. None of the games we ever work on are things we set up and say, we're just gonna phone it in. Like, nobody ever phones it in. They work like crazy on those things. So that shook people. When the sci-fi project got canceled, I inherited people a year earlier than I expected. And I found myself in a situation where I had to get 120 people excited when I didn't have a lot. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the mechanics, level design worked out. The core narrative still was in its infancy. We need to give Kratos a fresh start. We need to give the players a fresh start. We need to show him grow. We need to investigate a little bit more about what it is to be in this world and look at every decision we make through fresh eyes. The things we were looking at was really trying to dissect what's important for the franchise, and then also from that list, what can we actually flip on its head? And I think we have to be bold, because if we just release another game that is like the previous games, it's a very small cross-section of people that are going to say, that's exactly what I wanted. For me, I feel like you can just go back and play those if you miss those, because they're never going anywhere. I'm not going to go back and change any of those. They're a great part of our history. But the sort of big change, the bold change, takes constant convincing, constant years of just trust me. In previous games, we'd have an engine, and then we'd have core mechanics, and then we would build levels from those core mechanics while working out the sort of combat, but we'd sort of have our levels worked out with our combat at the same time. In this one, everything was getting started and constructed and theorized at the same time. So across the board, we were getting an engine, lighting, the ability to build a level, right? And a level itself, while at the same time getting all the mechanics designed, while at the same time figuring out what the core combat loop is. Literally everyone is waiting for another person to finish something because they've got something else. Like, how can somebody design a puzzle when we don't know what the puzzle mechanics are, right? So we are basically going over and over again, trying to figure out the solution to the questions we haven't even figured out how to ask yet, because everybody's at the same point. Like, I don't ever want to make a game like that again. Like that is literally the most stress you could possibly deal with. It is like designing a camera and a film stock while shooting a movie, while then figuring out who you want to be in it while writing it all on the same day. Like, everything being decided and figured out on the same day across the board. It is not the way to make games.
Speaking of risks,
I understand that having Atreus as like a companion was a challenge throughout development.
A challenge is like the understatement of the year. It was the scariest thing. Like, people were freaked out about the no-cut camera just because the amount of work we had to do. And there are a few unknowns about it, but there's a lot that we could point to as being, okay, I think we can figure this out. And there's nobody who's had the failure story from it. Companions, there's a lot of failure stories from that, right? And that's sometimes worse than having no information, is just having things to point to and say, look how bad it was here. Look how bad it was here. Look how bad it was here. And I'm saying, if we're going to take on the companion thing, we're not going to do what anybody else has done, right? The only reference point I could give them was Dead to Rights. I was like, it's going to be like the dog, right? Except we're going to go even further in that he is a part of the narrative. He is a part of the growth of these characters, but he is also fully integrated into everything. He helps you with puzzles. He is an appendage in combat, so much so that I said, think of it like he's the magic. And I feel like we needed to look at it that he was just as important to the gameplay loop as he was to the narrative arc. And they get into that a little bit, but then they'd also realize that's massive and nobody's really been able to achieve that. And how are we going to do that? And I had no real answer to that, except that we're going to go try to learn from everybody else. You know, go hang out with people over at Naughty Dog, go talk to everybody that we can who's done any of these companion, these AI characters, see what they learned, right? What they messed up. We used to send people out constantly over to Gorilla to kind of do the creative share week, where we would exchange information, learn about how their tools work. They learn about how our tools work, and we'd find out, wow, you guys are doing it in 10 steps, we can do it in 1. And then they'd say, you're doing it in 100 steps, and we're doing it in 1. So it's fantastic to kind of have that classic, what GDC used to be, right, of developers sharing tricks. But even with that, it's not enough. It still took probably till October of 2017, maybe even December of 2017, to get Atreus working right. So that is scary, because that's 4 years of uncertainty, 4 years of maybe we should get rid of the kid. And I had many conversations, very serious conversations at the beginning of, you need to cut him, right? Lots of scoping, and it's too big, we can't do it. I had my passive aggressive way of responding to that, which then saved Atreus in the game. But it didn't end there. Like, the idea of scoping him down, reducing the impact, like trying to figure out maybe there's a simpler and cheaper way to do this. Maybe this isn't so bad, right? And it was very difficult because, everybody's on your side. Like, that's the thing, is that I'm notorious perhaps for being a conspiracy theorist, and I always think there's an ulterior motive for everybody and every single thing. But deep down, I know that we're all on the same team, and they're all doing the best they can, and this is their job to question these things. But in the heat of the moment, when this is the 15th conversation you've had about this, and all you need to do is get to the next meeting, and you just need somebody to trust that this is going to be good, it's hard, man.
So venturing past the studio's own borders allowed Santa Monica to adapt to an ever-evolving development scene. They could learn from Sony's other first-party teams, choosing to keep their borders open so as not to suffocate behind their own walls. But Santa Monica also looked to developers outside of Sony's portfolio. Not just current projects, but games that have been around for decades, inspiring a long line of iterations in their wake.
We were influenced by all the games around us. We came to the table with our love of Metroid, Castlevania, Resident Evil, Onimusha. Resident Evil 4 came out when we were developing, I think, 2. So it was like the transition between 1 and 2. Resident Evil 4 came out, and we follow a lot of the Japanese game developers, especially in the early years, mostly because we admired all the work that they had done. And there were several Japanese game developers who said, Western game developers can't make a good action game, so we were like, yeah, we're going to take you guys on. And I think that love of their games just continued past that point. And when Resident Evil 4 came out, that was, as cliched as it, that was a game changer, right? That was this sense that they had said, the director of Resident Evil had said, you can't have a controllable camera and have horror, you'll never get scares, it's not possible. And then he totally figured it out. and in a spectacularly amazing way, right? And that was inspirational. I think everybody played that game, and everybody was coming into the office, and everybody was talking about it. Interestingly, at the time, it didn't inspire us to, I think, reinvent anything. But little did I know it would inspire later that sense of bravery. And it took 7 to come out that really cemented. They're not afraid to go back and re-examine everything, and that ability to do that and to actually succeed was a way for me to also inspire the rest of our team. Say, look at this, second time that they've reinvented their franchise, and second time it's totally worked out. That they've done it with passion and sincerity and earnestness, and what comes out of it is we're not doing this to make a buck. We're not doing this to check a box on the back of something. We're doing this because we have an idea. I had people coming up to me maybe a month or 2 ago, having finally had time to play through the whole game, that said, I'm really sorry. I doubted every decision you made, or I didn't believe in half the crap that you were telling us. I kept my mouth shut and really thought you were kind of ruining this franchise. But I just played through the whole game and I get it now. Or the no-cut camera was a giant bone of contention, and one of those things that until you play the whole game, you don't get it fully what we were trying to do. And they come back and say, look, I lost a lot of sleep over this thing, but it was worth it. Now I get it, right? Because I see it all together, and that's amazing.
In talking to Barlog, the conversation contained an overwhelming sense of relief, not just stemming from the fact that God of War is done, or even that it was well received, but also because the public was receptive to what, at its core, is a very emotional story.
There's the moment at the end of the game when they are spreading the ashes, and I had learned from an earlier thing that I don't want to talk through it, right? Maybe too many lines, too much talking might ruin the moment. Let's let this be a silent moment where we pull the camera back, and it's Kratos and Atreus standing next to each other, and it's just Atreus willingly leaning in to Dad, and Dad actually comfortably, not awkwardly, not thinking about it, putting his arm around him, and then we'll just kind of let that moment breathe. And there was the right near the finale of this, because it was already shot, it was already scored, everything was there, and we were doing some ADR, and my son had actually said that he loved me for the first time, and this was unprompted. There's a lot of, so my son is really struggling with the language early on because we're immersing him in Swedish and English. So he has a tendency to just parrot and repeat, like it's not a lot that is coming directly from him. But it was something that he literally just threw out there, and it absolutely just stopped me dead in my tracks. And I was just like, I didn't know how to deal with it. I was very overtaken with emotion at that point, and it stuck with me so hard that I think processed it subconsciously. Like, it's so absolutely personal, and that is throughout, like, so many moments that I feel like I'm connecting with, whether it's me and my father, whether honestly it's me and my wife. Like, there is a lot that we've been through on this. I think we all forget what we put those we love through to go through these things, because I'm an actual, just an emotional wreck throughout all of these things, right? There's so much stress and so many people applying pressure, but then also needing to kind of be that exposed nerve, to be open to these things, to know that is actually really good. Why are we not pushing on that more? I have a pretty severe OCD, right? I'm very particular about things, and I started noticing early on that, he barely understood language, and he had those same things. It broke my heart to see that I passed that on to him. I feel like it is truly not an environmental thing. It's like a genetic thing. He has it worse than I do, to the point where everything in our lives has to be in a certain order. I cannot open the car door before he is in a certain place, otherwise he's just going to lose it. And there's a huge part of me that had that, and I realized, this is something that when you look at Kratos, he looks at godhood like a disease. Right? He looks at it as something that he passed on to him. And for Kratos, he wanted one thing above all else, right? It wasn't vengeance. A lot of people think, oh, Kratos is all vengeance. No, he wanted to forget. He didn't want to have not done the things that he did. He didn't want to make up for the things that he did. He wanted somebody to erase it so he didn't have to carry the memory. So the early edicts that I had with the writers was saying that, we'll work years and we may only succeed in a single moment of truth in the entire game. And if we succeed in that single moment of truth, we still have a victory, right? I would love it if we push ourselves further beyond that and we have so many moments of truth throughout all of this game, and all of that is born from being able to put the mirror on ourselves.